up to about
Claim.
Call to order this meeting of the James City Service Authority Board of Directors for a regular meeting. Good evening, Mr. Powell.
Good evening.
Would you please call the roll?
Mr. Hipple.
Here.
Ms. Larson.
Here.
Mr. McGlennon.
Here.
Mr. Eisenhower.
Here.
Ms. Sadler.
Here. Next is presentations. Do we have any this evening?
No presentations?
Very good. Public comment? Any
No.
speakers?
No public comment.
Wow. Next is the consent calendar minutes adoption, appropriation, Hurricane Michael, $75,361.
So move the consent calendar?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any public hearings?
No, ma'am.
Wow, good. Board considerations, consideration of a personnel matter. Well, we're going to do that later, are we not?
Should we do it now?
Yes.
And that way we can get Mr. Powell on his way?
You probably need to get requests and directives and manager's update and then go to,
Yeah, we'll do that at the end. We'll just switch it around. That way we can go into closed session. All right, we'll move down to board requests and directives. Anyone?
nope, I'm good.
We're good. General manager's update.
Only thing I wanted to say is just in relation to the appropriation on the consent calendar, FMS did a lot of the groundwork and paperwork to help JCSA with that, and I just wanted to recognize their efforts.
Thank you so much. All right, with that, we'll look for a motion to move into closed section.
Motion?
Mr. Powell?
Mr. Hipple.
Aye.
Ms. Larson.
Aye.
Mr. McGlennon.
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower.
Aye.
Ms. Sadler.
Aye. We're now in closed. come back in?
No. We only spoke about those items we indicated we would discuss in closed session.
All right, Mr. Bell?
Mr. Hippel.
Aye.
Ms. Larson.
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower.
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan.
Aye.
Ms. Adler.
Aye. So now I need a motion for adjournment until 4 PM on July 23rd for a regular meeting.
Do I need to make an adjournment?
Oh, we have to do.
Doug's?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So I make a motion that Mr. Powell receive a 3% raise beginning October 1, 2019. Mr. Powell?
Mr. Hippel.
Aye.
Ms. Larson.
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower.
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan.
Aye.
Ms. Adler.
Aye. So now I'll need a
Motion for adjournment
Thank
until
you,
4 PM on July 23rd, 2019 for a regular meeting.
All right. Mr. Hippel.
Aye.
Ms. Larson.
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower.
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan.
Aye.
Ms. Adler.
Aye. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
meeting of the James City County Board of Supervisors for a work session. Mr. Stevens, call the roll, please.
Mr. Hippel?
Here.
Ms. Larson?
Here.
Ms. Sadler? Here. Mr. Magdalena?
Here.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Here.
All present.
Okay, board discussions. Our first is financial update. Okay, let you do the introduction.
Certainly. I just want to introduce Courtney Rogers. Most of you have met him before. He's been with us many times. Courtney works for Davenport and Company. He's currently our financial advisor, and he will be presenting a financial overview for us tonight.
Thank you. So I have 42 pages, so I guess I'll take about 2.5 hours. Some other things on the agenda this afternoon. So what I'm going to do is kind of skip through some pages because I understand we really want to get into the debt side of things toward the end of the presentation. So I'll just skip through some of the demographic pages in particular and just say that especially things like median family income, we're still in great shape on. These are comparisons that you're going to see throughout the presentation, where we're comparing you to other AAAs, especially those by Moody's. You'll notice that York's on there as one of your neighbors. They have a AAA from S&P, but not by Moody's. So they're what we call a split rating at the moment. But the others are all AAA, except for Goochland by all three.
Can you say that again? No, I'm just kidding.
That's important.
Don't test me.
So, one of the things we like to do is see where, how things have been trending on the financial side. These are the last 5 audited years. Your 19 is obviously coming to a close here in a few days. So we have basically unaudited, very preliminary numbers that finance staff's worked out for us. And one thing that you'll note is that 14 and 15 had negative change in fund balance. You actually dipped in a little bit of fund balance with some capital projects and things like that. 16, 17, and 18, we were able to put some money back into the fund balance and use it for some one-time projects. The 19 number you can see looks a little smaller. Again, it's preliminary. That may come up. But that's kind of where things tend to be trending at the moment. So it's something to keep an eye on. Tax rate still very competitive. These are some of the AAAs up there in Northern Virginia. You can see Albemarle over there is very similar to you all in terms of the tax rate, but still very competitive tax rate. Oops, sorry. Assessed values continue to grow. It's always a good thing. Another 2% on real property and 3% overall.
Can I just ask one other question about this, because it's kind of stuck out. Under public service, there was one year where we really jumped up a lot and then dropped back down again the following year. I happen to know what that's about.
I wish I remembered. I know there's a reason, because obviously if you average them out, there's a difference.
Right. Okay.
That's before my time in 2015, but I will find out.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a pretty big jump.
Next couple of pages show the assessed value per capita, which is basically, it tries to put everybody on a similar, it's basically taking the total assessed value by population, so you can kind of average it out. You can see we do very well there, one of the top ones in the state. Unassigned fund balance. Fund balances continue to grow. Again, sort of as we're talking about the finances and being able to add to it, you can see on this chart where you have been able to add to it. You might recall that we increased the target back in 2014. And you've even been able to get up to the high end of that target now in 18, and it looks like that trend will continue into 19. When you look at the comparisons on 13, you can see that you're not out of line with some of those AAAs. There are a couple of folks that you'll see that look fairly low, like in Arlington, Fairfax, Loudoun even. I can tell you that some of them put money in other funds. This is just unassigned. I know, for instance, Loudoun keeps their 10% fund balance in a committed fund, if you would, so it's not a part of unassigned. So this is, the unassigned is over and above the 10% they set aside for their policy of fund balance, their 10%.
And with them doing that, does that give them any?
No, because we explain to the rating agencies.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, they're looking at the whole. They're looking at dollars available. And so one of the things we do when we're talking to the agencies, we show a slide, we show unassigned, we show monies that might be available in a capital fund. It's not bond proceeds, but capital fund, because if that project was not moving, or even if it's halfway done, in a very tough situation, you could just say, stop the project. We need that money to operate. And that's what they care about. It's the flexibility, ability to pull money that is that you as a board can pull back.
Is that something in the future we should look at, maybe pushing that to 14%?
No,
Or is 12?
I think the 12 is a good number. 10
Because
to
we're
12.
at 13 something now, I think,
Right.
this year, looking at.
We're at 12.4, assuming we're projecting, I guess, that 1.9 million goes into fund balance. So that's still a good number. Now, the 10 to 12 is a really good policy. So we're comfortable with that as the AAA.
Okay.
All right, so that gets us into debt management. So page 15 shows the existing tax-supported debt service. So we're 135 million of total principal outstanding. One of the things we look at is how fast are you going to repay that 135? And you'll see it highlighted in the blue box. The measure that the credit market uses is what we call the 10-year payout ratio. How much principal is being paid back over the next 10 years. So you basically take the 10 years worth of principal from 2020 out to 2029 divided by the 135. Roughly 80% is going to be paid back in the next 10 years. That's a very strong number. 75 is a really good number. 70 is a number we want to try to stay around as well. I think our policy is 65 or something like that. And so we can get down lower, but we'd like to have it in the 70-plus range. And you can see the chart, most of that goes away in 2026, and then it drops down considerably from there. So the two measures that we use for capacity, how much can we go borrow and not jeopardize our AAA? The two policies we have are debt to assessed value, and that's outstanding debt divided by the total value of the county. And that's including personal property as well as the public service. So it's all assessed value, real and personal. And we are 3% our policy. We're at 1. We've got plenty of room. The one that we come a little closer to will be the one we talk about in a minute. So we're not as worried about this one. On page 17, you'll see that we're in great shape. You'll see a lot of others are kind of in that same boat with us. There's a few that might be up there around 2%. But for the most part, everybody's in that 1%, 1.5% range. So the one that we most people run into as an issue is debt service revenues, and that is what is the amount of debt service you're paying in a given year out of your budget divided by your budget. In this case, we're measuring versus revenues. So you look at the total amount of debt service divided by your budget. Now, in doing that, because we fund schools, we're going to include as a part of the revenues not only the general fund but also school revenues, netting out the transfer, of course, so we're not double counting it. But so we're counting money coming from the state because the state's not funding that debt service necessarily, and so we want to make sure that we're counting everything. So in this case, 10 to 12% is the target we just talked about. 8% or similar to your fund balance, but it's 10 to 12% of that revenue number. You're at 8 right now, and you can see it starting to come down. Now we've assumed a 2% annual growth on revenues. It's generally been in line with history recently. So that's a little bit of that drop down. But the other drop down is the debt. And you can see how, again, it falls off in 26 to 27. That's when a lot of the debt service drops off on your current projects. So when we do capacity, we're going to measure it really by the debt service revenues. Now, this chart on page 19, you'll notice that we actually are using operating expenditures. And the reason is that's the way Moody's reports it. They're pretty close. So for comparison purposes, they didn't have revenues available in their debt. They're modeled, so we used expenditures here. And you can see that policy, you see Stafford is well above that, yet they still have their AAA. You'll see folks like Loudoun are right up against the 10% policy there in terms of the bottom part of the target. Arlington County is there starting to get in that direction. But 10% is a good bottom and 12% is a good top. You can see that there's not many up in there, but that is really going to be your cap is getting up into that 10 to 12% range in terms of capacity. And we'll show you in a minute what some of the projected projects you've got on the books, as well as some projected possible new projects might do that. Thought I might give you a minute on the tax-exempt market and what's going on with interest rates. Bottom line is interest rates are really low. We was telling Supervisor Clinton we just closed $170 million for Loudoun County last week. They sold at a 2.35% interest rate, based on a 20-year basis. A little bit front-loaded because some of it was school FF&E that we do over 7 years, so it's a little front-loaded. But That's a really good interest rate. And so we sold bonds today for Leesburg on the refinancing. They weren't quite 20 years. It was just short of 20 years, and they were at 211, and they're AAA as well. So that gives you a sense of where the Virginia geo market. Bottom line is there's more dollars out there wanting to invest in bonds than there are bonds available. We were the only Virginia bond deal in the market this week, and it was only $12 million for Leesburg. So there's lots of dollars out there. In general, you've heard the news about the Fed cutting rates possibly. It was just, I would say, in the middle of December when there was talk about increasing rates 3 times this year.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, a lot of things, a lot of news started coming out in the January timeframe. People were like, "Oh, well, maybe we should hold off." And now we're talking about cutting rates. The market really has baked in a cut in July. But when they cut rates, remember they're only cutting overnight rates. The rest of the yield curve is all market driven. And so while we might see rates in the first 5 years drop a little bit with a cut, really the rest of the yield curve is going to move in terms of where the market thinks rates should be. And you can see here, this goes back to June of 18. Just look at that 10-year rate was at 2.49% on a tax-exempt basis for a AAA rated entity such as yourself selling bonds. Today it's a 166. The 20-year rate, there's a 289. Today it's a 216. So some 70 basis points lower just at the 20-year mark. So that just shows you what's happened in just 1 year, year over year. Now let's look at the next page. This shows you the high and low, and that first bar is basically the 1-year interest rate. So it's been as low as almost 0 and as high as 4.5%. On the 30-year side, it's been as high as 6% and as low as it's like just below 2%. That green bar is where we are right now. So we're almost as low as we've ever been when it comes to interest rates, and basically since the year 2000, almost 20 years now. So rates are good. That really tells you we're pretty historically low. And then one more chart here on interest rate trends. This is the 20-year interest rate. You see it was 6% back in the year 2000. It's been trending downward for the most part. Obviously, you have some bump ups. When you look at the circle part that we showed you, that's really the last presidential election. When Trump was elected, he said, "Hey, we're going to go out and rebuild America." And the market said, "Oh, here comes inflation. We're going to borrow away, taking care of these projects." Rates jumped up within basically 3 days, about 50 basis points. And then it started trickling back when everybody said, "Oh, this isn't going to happen overnight." They started realizing this is not going to happen overnight. And that's really what's happened. We've kind of bounced around. You can see the last couple of years. And then, again, around that kind of November, December timeframe, things have been trickling down ever since. And then one last chart here just shows our last bond sale and then where we are now. So almost 1%, a little over 1% lower. So rates are good. From a capital planning standpoint, on page 26, this is your capital improvement plan as adopted with your 2020 budget. You've got the uses of funds basically spread out between schools, general services, public safety, parks and rec, with most of it going to schools, and then some going to general services, and that would be the next largest area. And then on page 27, what we did was we said, okay, the part that you were thinking you might borrow, you can see that the first one sort of spread out over a 3-year time frame, and the second batch over a 2-year time frame. So we made the assumption that we would borrow, since $2 million is, you probably have enough in the bank that you could pre-fund that project if you would. We would wait and borrow that money in 2021. We can always move that around, but for the moment, we just assumed we'd wait till 2021, borrow the bulk of it. Plus, you may not know what the exact cost of the project is until you get closer to it as well. And then the second borrowing would be 2 years later, and we take care of the balance of those projects. So what you're going to see is we've factored those in, and we'll see what that does to our ratios. In addition to that $22 million in 21 and roughly $47 million in 23, we understand there's been discussion of maybe can we borrow some more. So for discussion purposes, we decided we'd pick $20 million as a number. If it's half that, we can divide the debt service by 2, and you kind of see what happens. We're going to show you on the chart with the debt ratios. Each of these 3 is different colors, so you kind of see it. Some of the assumptions down there, I will say this, we are very conservative by nature. I just told you interest rates were in the low twos. We were using 4% as our planning rate. Because the problem is we're still a couple years away from one and even further away from the 2023. And while in the next 18 months it looks like rates are going to stay low, who knows when they're going to jump back up. And as you saw, just with a simple message at about 1 o'clock in the morning, rates jumped up 50 basis points in 3 days. So rates tend to jump high, faster than they go down. So we want to be conservative. So for the moment, we're using a 4% planning rate for these. We also did a little bit of structuring. I'll show you on the next page, on page 29 here. What we have is the existing debt service in the first column that we showed you at the beginning of the debt section. So that's the existing debt service. 19.6 million is what you have in the budget this year. Then we've got the school and fire projects for 2021. That's the 22 million. Then we've got the 20 million of projects to be determined. So that could be whatever you decide. Could be could be higher than that, could be lower than that. And then 2023 is the 47 million. And so again, the first two, the 21s, are coming in basically borrowing in 2021, whereas the 2023 will be 2 years later. And you can see when you add all these across, 19.6 million there in 2020, we really don't eclipse that number. The highest number after that is out there in 2025 at 19.679. But if you draw your eyes over to the column just to the left, you'll see it's only 1.9 million for 2 years. That's interest only. What we did was we were trying to purposely keep the final column below that 19.7, just to show you that you could actually take on these projects with the additional 20 million and basically use the debt service budget you have in your current budget. So you wouldn't have to find additional revenues anywhere else. You'd even have a little extra there in 2021 because you'd only need 17.8 million in 2021 before we start issuing the new debt. So that's just more from a cash flow standpoint, but we can change that around. And if we borrow the 2021 bond issues at a lower interest rate, that obviously helps as well. So,
Courtney, in 2024, the 994,500, is that just a half a year payment?
it is a partial year payment, and we did what we call capitalized interest for 6 months prior to that. Again, trying to keep that number under the roughly 19 million. And those are numbers that's so far out. We've tweaked those probably a half dozen times, if not more, before we ever got to that borrowing. But we just want to kind of show you that you could accomplish this without having to find additional dollars if you want to go forward. This goes back to the capacity, more the debt ratios. Are we going to eclipse our AAA issue? So page 30 shows that new debt service on top of our existing being the dark green, the light green being the school and fire 21 projects, the tan being the projected other projects, the 20 million, and the blue being the 2023, the larger projects coming up. And so that you can see graphically here, we didn't get above that 19 and change, that $20 million number. We also didn't try to fill in the gap there in 2027. That's something else that could be looked at is, do we bring some of that principal forward that we pushed out by virtue of doing some interest only in years 25 and 6? So that's another thing we could do to offset a little bit of the cash flow that we were doing there. So on 31, our first ratio is still in great shape. Debt to AV, nowhere near the 3%, not even at 1.5%, and that's with basically, what is that? I guess 47, 20, and 20. I mean, we're almost 90 million plus.
89.
Yeah. And even when we go to page 32, which shows that our debt service to revenues is even below our lower target of 10%. In fact, we don't give above the 8%, which is roughly where we are now. And again, that's with a 2% projection growth annually and with the higher interest rate assumption as well. So I think part of the question that you all were asking was, how do we look from a ratio standpoint, taking these projects on, and you've got the capacity to do that. And then page 33 shows we use the term affordability. It's really the cash flow side of it. Assuming you freeze your 2020 budget at 19.7 million, you actually could take on these additional projects unless interest rates, of course, jump higher or the project costs jump up. Last on page 34. So assuming you do those projects, what other capacity do you have? You can see you still have quite a bit of capacity over and above that. So really, I guess the key takeaways from our vantage point is that all of your key demographic metrics, financial metrics, debt metrics are all still in line with the AAAs. No concern from our standpoint. You look good versus peers. Looks like the planned capital program you've got, no issues whatsoever under the debt ratios. And then even if you wanted to bump that up a little bit, you've got the capacity to do that. So we're happy to obviously run additional cases as you have some discussions about what you might want to do in the future. But from our standpoint, everything looks good.
Good. Yeah.
Courtney, thank you very much for putting all this together, because I think it's really very clear and helpful in terms of understanding where we are, and really reassuring in terms of our ability to do some things that we might find to be important priorities along the way. And so it's especially gratifying to see that we could not only do what we know is already planned for in terms of capital improvement, but there are some other opportunities to do some other things as well. You know, whether it's in terms of school facility, putting away some land for future facility needs, PDR and open green space and the like, or other projects that might be out there. So I think that's very, very helpful.
Kind of complex.
And of course, the conservative approach you're taking in terms of projecting interest rates really gives us sort of, you know, if things really change fairly dramatically in the interest rate world, that we're still in pretty good shape.
Added cushion.
Yeah.
And it was an excellent presentation when we read it beforehand. It was very, very clear. So we really appreciate it. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So Scott, do we have a discussion about, I mean, what's the best way to follow up with this about, you know, possibly moving some things or?
You know, a couple of comments I've heard from the board too. Your land conservation, whatever form or fashion that takes, if you want to move that forward, it takes some dollars to really make an impact with that. If you choose to move forward with that, and that's what later on this work session agenda. Then the other area I've heard some conversation is Parks and Rec. You have an awful lot out there. Do you want to accelerate any of those type projects so that they happen in the next 5 years versus the next 10 years or so?
Okay.
So I think that really will be future discussion for the board of where you want us to go with either one of those items or other things that could possibly be out there. Sharon, anything in the capital that comes to mind?
I would just add, you know, with capital projects, a lot of times there's an impact on the operating budget as well.
Yeah.
Particularly when you build a school or you open a new facility or a new park, you know, facility, just to consider that. And that's something obviously we could assist in giving you some estimates and what that impact would look like.
Mm-hmm. And I think that is really important. One of the great things we did when we were getting ready to bring a high school online was basically adjust the tax rate in a way that helped us to fund that, a good portion of the capital cost there. But then when the building opened, we were able to convert that to operating and be able to do it without changing the tax rate. So,
Excellent example.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Sharon, while you're here, I know we're not even finished with the year yet, but how are things there? Are we any changes in outlook?
Yes.
And they're positive, aren't they?
Positive. We do expect it to end the year in a positive net position. We were conservative in our estimate. I think the number we provided was about $1.9 million. It's very early. We're still continuing to collect taxes, of course, being the month of June. Technical speak-wise, we'll continue to make accruals for 45 more days, both on the revenue and the expenditure side. Really, everything's trending along with budget. We've had a pretty high year with our health insurance claims, so we're watching that very closely. We did make a change this year in carriers, and usually the first year you make a change, you do tend to see a spike. The reason for that is you're paying runoff claims under the old policy as well as paying claims under the new policy. But we have a reserve for that. We have a reserve for health insurance claims under the old policy. So even though it looks like $2 million, we do have a portion of that additional cost that's being covered from reserves and not the current year balances. And it's coming from health insurance reserves. So it's what people have paid into that's paying those claims. So it's more a timing issue. We'll continue to monitor that. We're looking at claims on a monthly basis and doing some analytics on that. So usually just based on utilization. But we do look for things like our discounts and anything that may be within our control.
Good, thank you. Thank you, Sharon. All righty. Our next one is the presentation on Department of Social Services.
It is not loaded.
And Ms. Vinroot is trying to, is the computer working for you?
Well, I don't see it on here, so I brought this, and we'll see if we can just get it. Good thing I brought my backup. Always have a safety net, right?
Talk about these.
Oh, yeah, no, thanks. I'll leave that to you. You're the expert. Okay, so as I multitask here, coming to my rescue.
Yeah, it can hear me. I'm gonna switch it.
Okay.
That's not the question.
Okay. I mean, I have it right here too. Bring it just in case.
Oh, there you go.
Okay, good. Okay. All right, I apologize for that. So yes, thank you for having me. I'm here to do a just an update. Sorry. Okay. All right. So I'm Rebecca Vinroot, the Director of Social Services for James City County. Before I begin, I do have some people with me who are here to support me. You all know Barb Watson, who's my Assistant Director. I do have Angie Morris. She is from Virginia Department of Social Services, what we call the Home Office. So she is the Director of Local Support and Performance. And Joe Wilson-Hart is the Eastern Regional Director for Social Services as well. So they came to support, and they always love to come out and see what the locals are doing, because if you've been to one local Department of Social Services, you've been to one local Department of Social Services. Social services, we have, in James City County, we have what I like to refer to as our traditional social services programs, which are those programs designed to help individuals meet their basic needs. We call those our benefit programs. And then we have our more of our family services programs, which work with children, the disabled population, and seniors in our area. And in James City County, particular to James City County, we have our housing programs, and that is unique to James City County. I believe there's only a couple of other localities who have housing programs under social services. So those are some of the buckets that I will be talking about. So just looking at our organizational chart, we have myself as the director, Barb is the assistant director, and she is directly over housing and our child health initiative program, which I'll go into a little bit, but which is a local initiative, as well as our kinship navigator, which is a grant funded position that I'll talk about in a little bit. We have chief of services, who is over all of our services programs, children and families, and adults and disabled individuals. And then we have our chief of benefits, which oversees financial and child care assistance and health care assistance for Medicaid. And then we have our administrative services manager, who is over our administrative support. We also have an advisory board. So we have, right now we have 6 individuals who meet on a regular basis to kind of give us oversight, help us outreach in the community and make sure that we're messaging and we're providing services that are in need. And then, as I mentioned, we have our regional oversight, as well as our state oversight for social services. And then for housing, we have the Department of Housing and Community Development and Virginia Housing and Development Authority out of Richmond. So we have a few different oversights that we feed into. So as you all know, in James City County, we are about 75,000 strong. 20% of those are 65 and older, which is a lot larger than the percentage statewide. As far as our youth, under 18, we're 20%, which is about standard. Our median household income is $80,000. However, about 43% of our households are cost burdened, which means they pay more than 30% of their income for housing. Our poverty rate currently is 7.5%, which is lower than the statewide average, and it's lower for children as well as those who are over 60. However, any percentage of the poverty rate is too high, so we certainly have programs designed to help people get what they need. Our unemployment rate is fairly low, and then that's our disability rate. So this is all based off of a local profile report that we get every year through social services. So moving to our housing programs, I'm going to talk a little bit about the main programs that we have. So we have our Housing Choice Voucher Program, which we don't have a housing authority in that we don't operate a building where people live or reside. We help individuals go through the private market to obtain vouchers, and we assist them in paying for their rent, which is based on their income. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in detail on the next slide. Out of our Housing Choice Voucher Program, we have what we call our Family Self-Sufficiency Program, and this is a program where individuals can choose to participate, and they end up at the end of the participation getting money to then put towards a house of their own. So we currently have 18 participants, and we work really closely with them to try and help them achieve their self-sufficiency goals. Our Virginia Homeless Solutions Program is one where we get the funding through Hampton Social Services, which is the Regional Continuum of Care. So the funding originates from HUD, and it goes through Hampton Social Services, and then we get some money to help with those who are homeless or precariously housed. So we have some twice-a-month meetings with our community partners where we staff the individuals who are needing assistance and decide how they can be served. And so we serve them either through prevention, trying to prevent them from getting into a situation where they're homeless, or we rapidly rehouse them, or we do sometimes provide temporary shelter. We have a housing crisis hotline that individuals call, and then they get funneled back to our office, and then we work through them again with our community partners to really treat them, their individual situation with what they need instead of just kind of rubber stamping them. So it's a pretty good process that we have, and again, it takes a lot of partnerships, which, as you'll see, is our theme. Talking a little more in detail about our Housing Choice Voucher Program, we currently have 172 individuals that are leased up through our program. 139 of those are generated by us directly. We do have individuals that port in from other jurisdictions. That kind of speaks to the choice. If individuals have a need for work or for family, and they have a voucher already, they can port into our locality. And as long as they find a place that will take the voucher, sometimes we absorb them, sometimes we don't, just based on how much funding we have for that. We do have 2 individuals who receive the voucher through their ID, intellectual disability or developmental disability waiver. And then the VASH one is we have particularly for veterans that are referred to us. So as you can see, this is a map of where they are. So they're all over James City County. We don't concentrate them particularly in one area or another, although you might see some apartment complexes that may have more than other areas, but that's just because of the nature of the apartment complex. We have the demographics, 57 are elderly, 86 are disabled, 92 have children, and 92 are single. The average cost per unit to the program is $567 a month. We don't pay $567 for every individual who receives a voucher. It depends on their income, but that's the average of what we end up paying for them. Moving on to some other housing programs, we have our first-time home buyer program, which provides down payment and closing cost assistance. So we provide housing counseling education to those outside of or in our area, and also particularly targeted for James City County employees. So as you can see, we have programs that we rotate through where we really try and help people gain the tools that they need to be a successful homeowner or a successful renter, whatever they need to end up, maintaining their housing. We also do housing preservation services. So we do home energy loss prevention, emergency home repairs. So anything that, if they financially qualify as low income, then we can help them sustain their home. The Rural Homeowner Rehab Program is something that we are partnering with neighborhood development. So that's over in community development. And we got a grant through DCD for that. And so this is starting to work through our housing condition study and those homes that were identified as really being in need of some serious repair. So because of the grant we got, individuals who receive this assistance, it's all grant funded. So we go in and we assess what they need. We're finding out that some of them have some significant needs. So we are leveraging some assistance from housing partnerships and some other community agencies to help us go in and repair. So this is just an example of some work we did in a bathroom. And this is an example of some work we did for somebody's front steps. So we really go in and it's those that were severely distressed. So with our current grant, we can only serve 10 people because we're finding out that when you really get there, there's a lot more need than we originally had anticipated. So we're hoping that we can get another grant to do a little bit more work. So the next steps for housing, as you all know, the Workforce Housing Task Force concluded its work and gave recommendations. So concurrently, along with that task force, we had a technical advisory committee, and we're continuing to meet through that committee. So we have social services and housing, community neighborhood development, we have financial management staff, we have economic development, we have WADA, and I should have written this up there, we also have somebody from the schools. So they're helping us work through all of the buckets of recommendations and come up with a matrix of what we currently have that we can work through this and what we need in order to implement recommendations. So I believe we're actually going to come back to talk to you guys in September about that, but I just wanted to let you know we are working through that. One of the initiatives that we're also applying for is a scattered site rehab project, and we're hoping that we can continue to serve the folks that had the severely distressed homes through that. So that's going to be a continuation if we receive that grant. The other thing we're working on, which does come out of the housing preservation bucket from the Workforce Housing Task Force, is we're going to have our first ever rehab blitz through Habitat for Humanity. So Habitat for Humanity approached us about doing some rehabs in a particular neighborhood, and we brought housing partnerships on board as well. And so September 7th, we're going to be in the Forest Glen neighborhood, and we have we're collecting applications for folks in that neighborhood who own their homes and need light rehab. We're not building ramps or anything significant like that, but it's kind of like a day of caring, but it's particularly for rehabs. So we actually right now are trying to recruit team leaders, so people who have particular skills in the construction area.
I hear you.
So I did bring some flyers here with me.
See, I'm writing it down.
Yeah, I know. It's in your district too. So we're hoping that we can get, for every home, we need a team leader, and then we'll have volunteers. So we're going to be really pushing this. It's a great way to give back to the community. So I brought some information about that. So we're excited about that opportunity to work through that. Okay, so putting on the social services benefits hat, that bucket, these are the programs that are under what I refer to as the more traditional programs. So these are the programs that are mandated for us to provide as a local Department of Social Services. So as you can see, we have the numbers of clients vary from year to year. Our Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, which is our food assistance, our Medicaid, the temporary assistance for needy families, what we call TANF, child care assistance, energy, fuel assistance, and fraud. So these are the programs that we run through that. Looking particularly at SNAP, as you can see, it's all over the county. So again, I like to kind of plot things on a map so you can see that we have people from the lower to the upper end needing some supplemental assistance. This is not supposed to serve as folks' primary means of money for food, but we all know food costs can be higher sometimes than people can afford to pay. So this is a supplement. So in 2018, we served 5,767 individuals. 47.5% of those were under 18. And as you can see, it's for a family of 4, it's $2,720 of gross income a month that you can receive. We go anywhere from $16 a month to those who are single individuals. Sometimes it's, 192 for single individuals. So it's all over the map as far as what we provide, but the average issuance is $120 per person. And this is from May 2009, just a snapshot of that. I'm talking a little bit about Medicaid expansion because that is a new program that was rolled out in January of this year. So as of May, we had 1,738 newly enrolled individuals under the expansion. So these are for those individuals ages 19 through 64. And you can see the breakdown of the income as far as what their income threshold is to be able to qualify for Medicaid with the expanded Medicaid. We are having a great partnership with the Williamsburg Health Foundation. They have really taken it on as their mission to have as many people as possible have access to health insurance. That's something that certainly we all need. And so they're really working with us and through the City of Williamsburg and York County as well. So they've done some workshops to help people understand the process, to help other people apply. Tomorrow I will be going to a lunch they're having with the Chamber of Commerce where they're trying to target some businesses that may have employees who don't get employee insurance but who may qualify for Medicaid. So they're going to be introducing the program and giving them information. So that's, again, been a really great partnership. Our VIEW program, we have a couple of programs that are, in a sense, a hybrid between benefits and services. So for the VIEW program, which they recently changed their name, so now it's the Virginia Initiative for Education and Work, trying to take the welfare word out of it. This is for individuals who are receiving TANF, and we're trying to focus on eliminating their barriers to employment. So when they participate in the program, they get assistance with eliminating their barriers for childcare, transportation, housing, so that they can get job training. They can get career development, not just another job. We've done a little bit of partnership with economic development because they have what we call the demand side. They have businesses that need people to work for them, and we try and stick to people who don't have to commute a lot to get to work. And then we have the supply side. We have the individuals who need the job. So we've done a little bit of partnership with them and trying to work with some local businesses to hire some of our individuals. And we also have a customer service academy, which is collaborative with Williamsburg, York Pocosin and Social Services, Literacy for Life, and Thomas Nelson. So we're really, with that program, we do some career counseling, some particular customer service skills so that they can get some of those soft skills that they maybe did not have the opportunity to learn in other jobs. So again, we're just trying to eliminate all the barriers so that people can focus on getting a career and not just another job. So there's another grant opportunity that's coming up soon as well. And again, most of these grants are regional, and that's really a good way to be able to create more impact. Okay, so moving on to the services for children and families. The services that we provide for them, again, majority of them are mandated. Child protective services, foster care, adoption assistance. We do training for individuals who want to become a foster parent or adoptive parent. We try to do 2 of those a year. Right now, we're really trying to recruit for those who will take older teens or sibling groups. We have a training we're gearing up for in the fall. We do train relatives on an individual basis. So if we have a child who enters foster care and we have a relative that has signed up to be the foster parent, we can train them individually. They don't need to wait for that because we understand that that's a big ask for them. We have our Children's Services Act program, which provides funding for at-risk children to receive services. And that's something that is housed at our local social services, but it really is a multidisciplinary team of individuals from the schools and colonial behavioral health and court services that really work to kind of identify what are the services. On the right side, our new program, our regional kinship program, that is grant funded from the state. So the state is starting to roll out the Family First Prevention Services Act, which is a piece of federal legislation, which is being able to leverage Title IV funds, which right now only pay for children in foster care, paying for services to prevent foster care. So one of the programs that we are able to provide is assisting relative caregivers who their children are not in foster care that they're caring for, but trying to connect them to resources. It's really difficult to take children into your home, even if they're your relatives and they've seen some trauma and they need a lot of services. And so we have a woman who works not only with us, but with Williamsburg and York County and Pocosin, but she's housed out of our agency. We're hoping that that program will continue in the next year because we're definitely noticing that there's a need. We're going to be starting some support groups and some other programs for that population. The program that I wanted to highlight, which I'll be talking about in a little bit for the Year 2 funding, is our Child Health Initiative program. So this is another partnership that we have with the Williamsburg Health Foundation. It started in July of 2018. We're about to go into our second year. It's a real kind of outside-the-box program that is, again, leveraging a lot of partnerships. So wrapping around families who have multiple challenges, socioeconomic health challenges, and the goal is to have them achieve better health and well-being. These are individuals who are not, in Child Protective Services. They're not really in any particular program, but they really need a wraparound team. So it's very innovative. The city of Williamsburg also has a program that they do as well. I believe they're about to start their 4th year. So we're currently serving 15 families. We have a social worker and a nurse case manager who work with the families to really meet whatever needs they have. We're about to launch into getting a software program as well, so we can start to track them and maybe be able to get some additional support for the program in the future. Okay, so moving on to our seniors. The programs that we provide for them that are mandated are Adult Protective Services and our Adult Services. We investigate abuse, neglect, financial exploitation, referrals. That does include Eastern State Hospital, and the referrals have increased significantly. So we're not really sure if that's just because more people are aware of the need to report it. Our population is increasing. We haven't been able to really pin down why. So we're just trying to deal with the response to it. But we are trying to focus as well on some long-term care planning and some other initiatives to try and get individuals prior to when they are unfortunately experiencing abuse or neglect. And one of those, which you may have heard a little bit about, is our Connect program. We're very proud of this program. That is a collaboration between social services, fire, EMS, and the police. There's actually a WI Daily article this week about it. So we're very proud of this collaboration. I think it's really going to make an impact on individuals who have been relying on calling 911 for anything from falls to just all kinds of reasons, but it's not necessarily an emergency, although it is to them and we want to serve them. So we're trying to connect them to things ahead of time. So what really struck me when I was looking through the numbers, and again, this is the map of where these individuals are, is that 70% of the people who were referred to us from fire EMS, we did not know about. So these are not individuals who have come to us or who maybe even would think to come to us. And so the fact that we can go in there and serve them is, I don't know that we would be able to do this without this program. They would wait until they really get too far down the line sometimes and they're in the crisis. So we're really glad that we're able to, again, leverage those partnerships to be able to try and meet their needs. So putting this all together, we launched our own strategic plan effort back in 2018, where we're really trying to focus on how do we support our community. So we're continuously evaluating our services, trying to meet the needs of our citizens, and again, looking at our existing and potential partnerships. So we have 3 different areas that we're focusing on: awareness and outreach, service delivery, and team growth and culture. So the last slide is really kind of bringing that all together. So we're going to host our first ever community fair on August 17th at our building. And the main goal of this is to bring awareness to not only the services that we provide, but the services that our partners provide. So we're going to have several community partners, not only within the county, but also outside of the county. So we're going to be having school supplies. We're going to be having referrals to other services. We'll have some soda go. We'll have some games. We want to make it a fun event. Hopefully the weather will be nice to us for this, because there'll be some things outside and there'll also be some things inside. So we are really excited about having an opportunity to really kind of focus on what we do to prevent and to really connect people. So the hashtag is connecting the community, because that's really how we see ourselves being the most beneficial, along with the safety net services. That's the end of my presentation.
Well, Rebecca, thank you very much. And I will tell the board, I had several meetings with Rebecca to start this, because some of the things that came along, like our affordable housing projects and things that we were dealing with as a board, very quickly highlighted the fact that I did not know enough, and I don't think a lot of us knew enough about what was available to all of our citizens. And so I sort of asked for this presentation, and I think it's really an excellent in-depth. I think it's an eye-opener for a lot of things, but it tells us there's a tremendous amount of work going on. So I'll open it up for questions for anybody.
I do have one. Actually, my neighbor brought this up to me, wanted to know kids who receive food for lunches at school, what happens, and I think they forwarded that info to you, what happens to them during the summertime? Where can they go? Are there services available, programs available, nonprofits? How can I direct people?
There's actually a couple of different initiatives. So there is a summer meal program that the Greater Williamsburg Outreach Ministry is hosting. So they are delivering meals to children living in motels and low-income housing. There's also the food bank that's providing weekend bags. The school system is doing a pilot with some particular children that they have targeted. If you're in the Grove area, Grove Christian Outreach Center does a wonderful job of providing some summer lunches. So really, right now, we have a lot of community partners who are doing things. But if anybody has a question, they can certainly call our office to help direct them, because it may depend on where they live.
Okay.
Particular to that.
So there are things available for kids during the summer. That's good to know. Great. Thank you.
So along those lines, it's your community fair, because there's been a lot in the news about these huge amount of balances that get run up for non-payment of school lunches. And so, however, are the schools, you said that they're joining you on the 17th, so will they, or they're not?
No, we won't have anybody from the schools. We'll be handing out some school supply.
Because it would be a great opportunity to have the free and reduced lunch applications there. Because the more outreach that you can do on that and get people to fill those out, that's what happens so often is, and there's a real decline after middle school and high school, and then those kids end up going hungry because, but if you fill that application out, you can eat. So but you might want to think about providing that, or seeing, even if somebody, I know it's the summer, but somebody might be willing to come over from nutrition services from the school. The only other, and it's too much to talk about today, but I would at some point like to do a little deeper dive into homelessness and not just the affordable housing side of it, but what is going on with homelessness in James City County and what's that look like and that kind of thing. It's at some point in a later work session.
Well, I can tell you that we have, the Health Foundation did convene a housing collaborative a few months ago, and it met over a period of time where we brought all of the agencies that serve homeless individuals to the table, and we were really talking about how we can have a continuum of what is provided. So what happens now is that when individuals call us or call our partner, we talk to each other and we say, okay, what can you provide? When we ask individuals, where else have you gone? Have you gone to other community partners, or be your first call? And so we really do try and connect. One of the issues I see is that there's unfortunately not enough for prevention. Sometimes individuals have to have an eviction notice, which is not what we want to see. So we're really trying to look at how we can work together. So that work is continuing.
Okay.
I think we all have good relationships with each other. The SCAN process that I mentioned is a formal way to get together and talk about it, but it's not going to meet the need for everything. We still have to kind of talk about some outside the box situations. So we do have some local funding where we do end up paying people's rent or paying what they need when nobody else can meet that need, because we don't want to see people, especially people with children or those who are elderly or disabled, on the streets. So we have certainly paid for people to get, what they need. But again, we really try and work together to make sure that we are working together, because I think a lot of people just don't know what's out there either. So.
And then I commend the Community Health Foundation, Williamsburg Health Foundation, because I went to one that they did in James City County in conjunction with the Hotel Motel Association, where they were trying to get hospitality workers to come out, and they were checking their blood pressure, their A1C, and Lackey was there, and so and
we were there.
Yeah, they were trying to coordinate to try to help people get insurance, or if they, here's another possibility. So I think that's great, and I appreciate them doing that.
Yeah, they're good.
So yeah.
Just a couple of things, if I could. First of all, it is a very impressive array of programs and opportunities. And I guess I just wonder about how confident people feel about their ability to navigate through all those services and actually get connected to the ones that would help them most. Is there a lot of direct assistance associated with this?
That's really all we do.
Yeah.
Because I don't really see us necessarily as a service provider unless the service is case management. It gets confusing for a lot of us. And so if you have any kind of trauma or any kind of other things going on, you can feel very overwhelmed. The Child Health Initiative is certainly a huge navigator for families that have children with significant health needs, because again, doctor's appointments and all of those things, specialists, they can be very overwhelming, and sometimes people are not paying for medical care because they're trying to pay for the roof over their head. So trying to eliminate the basic needs barriers so that they can focus on their health needs is what that program is for. The Kinship Navigator is another example of helping individuals who didn't necessarily think that they were going to be in the situation to raise children later on in life, or and a lot of them don't recognize or realize, I guess, what services are out there. So that is a connector program that can kind of give people some information, but there are definitely families who start at one track and then get referred over to another track because their needs are multi-layered. So I think for us, we're just constantly assessing, what is your need and connecting them. So I think just the case management that we provide is the main service that we provide.
And what's the total number of staff members who are doing this?
Oh gosh, total about maybe 70, 60 something. So,
One of the things that always seems to me to be a concern, especially among older residents, and when we see situations like folks who are having a hard time sort of maintaining a kind of normal flow of life, paying their bills, starting to see things stack up and not contact, is social isolation.
Yes.
Is that something that we have a good handle on?
I think we're trying to get there. So I didn't mention, we have a multidisciplinary team that meets on a regular basis that is made up of different providers. And we have a monthly calendar that we send out to those agencies to distribute to their clients about what's going on. Because I agree, social isolation is a big part of what we're trying to work on. And the library has some programs. We've started to do more social programs as well. We've had some. We tried to have a holiday lunch, but we got snowed out, so we had a relative lunch. And we actually went and picked people up and brought them to the rec center and tried to get them out and about. We are in the very initial planning stages of partnering with the Center for Balance and Aging Studies at William & Mary at the Department of Health Sciences. They have a program that they're doing where they're actually providing an intervention for those who are falling. So they do an assessment of their gait analysis and balance, and then they have a class that students run. And so we are working with them to try and provide that service to those in our Connect program. Right now they're doing it at Winsford Landing. But when we do that program, we're going to bring people together. So we're going to bring individuals to the rec center, have food, and have them do this analysis, and then our assessment, and then get them into a class. So they're coming to this regular class twice a week. So not only are they working on their strength and their balance, but they're meeting people, they're getting out. Because that is certainly, particularly if you're falling a lot, you're scared to go out. And so you stay in to be safe, but then you're not, getting...
Interacting with other people and stimulating your brain.
Right, which can end up leading more to your decline. So they're definitely, as I learn about new initiatives and different things, I'm like, okay, how can we get involved with that?
That's great. Was this a pilot this year of the Children's Health Initiative?
It was, yes.
Right, and it served 15 families. Is that about as many as it will serve?
Actually, the highest capacity is 25.
25.
So because we got the funding started in July and we had to hire staff, that delayed us from actually taking in families. And so currently we're serving 15, but our capacity is 25. So we get referrals from the schools and from Child Development Resources and from social services. And then we staff them and accept them. A big part of what contributes to the lower numbers on that program are willingness. And we have to have families commit to some intensive home visiting. And really a lot of people in your business trying to get you to the next step.
Right.
And so you have to be ready and willing to accept that help. And if you're ready and willing to accept it, it's there for you. So that's a little bit of what keeps the numbers low, as well as the complexity of the families and how much time they need to the transportation to get to these appointments and all of that. So,
and I just have one more, and that is about Medicaid expansion. Were the 1,738, was that a higher or lower number than you had anticipated?
I think it was a little higher.
Yeah, that sounds like the state
1,400
situation.
Yeah.
Coming a little bit higher than it had been anticipated.
Yeah, I think so. But fortunately, the state gave us some money, and so we were able to hire some additional staff to be able to process that.
Okay. Great. Thanks. Great job.
Any other questions? Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you all for being here.
I think does Rebecca stay?
Yeah,
She does. We move next to grant award for the James City County Child Health Initiative. And we have a resolution here.
Yes. So I don't know that I need to go into the program, but this is the year 2 of the program. We asked for a little bit more money this year to be able to do the program for a full year. So we have a coordinator and a case manager, social work case manager, and a nurse case manager. So the request is to accept the $275,000 and continue the 3 positions.
Okay.
I'm happy with the resolution.
Okay. We have a motion on the floor.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. No, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you
right.
all for coming.
Did you want to have Mr. Kinsman do the next one, or are you gonna do it?
I think Adam's got that, or
Okay, all right.
Carl, let me see if they're ready.
Okay, see if you're ready. Do the shift. Thank you again. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
How are you?
Well, oh, I'm sorry. Yes. We are ready for the Land and Water Conservation Fund grant. You would care to discuss?
Sure. I'm Carla Merle, and I'm from Parks and Recreation. What you have before you is a memo and a resolution in support of the Parks and Recreation Department applying for a matching grant from the state to purchase the land that surrounds Brickyard Landing Park. I know you had a work session previously, and you approved a purchase agreement through resolution. And this is a separate resolution that's required by the granting agency. It just has some language about what's required when you get the grant in terms of putting the land in a conservation easement. And it just lets you know that the grant is a matching grant that you get reimbursed after you purchase.
I had one question. I don't know whether Adam was around. Is he?
I'm sure he's close.
Because I think it was his question. Adam?
Yes, sir.
The question I had where it says number 6 on this. We acknowledge that any non-recreational uses may not be made of the property without undergoing a conversion of use process and obtaining approval from the Department of Conservation and Recreation and the United States Department of Interior and National Park Service. Mm-hmm. If we were to have to use some of that property, ultimately we were talking about potentially for some sort of a facility, would we have to go through a withdrawal process with this?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And what kind of financial obligation would that, I mean, would it affect how much we've gotten, or would we have to repay any, or what?
There's a repayment.
Okay.
And sometimes also they would ask for you to identify a different piece of property.
Okay.
If it's that much of the property that's unusable at that point for recreation. It's a small part, and it could just be a payment back for the grant for that part.
What John and I talked about too is that as we go through this process, we may try to talk with them about setting aside an area that we might have for later use.
Okay.
And then see how that affects the funding.
Okay.
You know, I don't know that it'll affect it a whole lot, but we're planning for that.
Okay. That was my concern. The only thing that I had on that. Any other questions about it?
I'll move the motion forward.
Okay. We have a motion.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel? Aye. Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Make it nice and easy there. All right. We are next to number 5. Talking about reactivating an open space preservation program in James City County, reassembling the toolbox, and creating a blueprint for decision making.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Over the past several months, the board has been discussing the past, present, and future of the county's open space preservation program. To aid this discussion, staff prepared a memo which covered the history, current status, and opportunities for the program. It aimed to evaluate the tools of a potential open space program and create a blueprint for decision-making that allows staff and the board to proceed accordingly. Admittedly, the result was quite a long memo. I hope you had a chance to read it all.
Very comprehensive.
Yes.
Which I won't attempt to summarize in detail today. Rather, the focus will be on the decision points regarding future actions. As detailed in the memo, James City County has a long history of public support and action on conservation and open space preservation. Our early conservation tools range from use value taxation, AFDs, policies and regulations that set expectations and allowed us to accept easements for properties with certain conservation values. These tools continue to be helpful today in terms of conservation, but their limitations ultimately led the county to seek tools which could ensure permanent protection, conserve a wider range of conservation values, be more proactive in targeting significant properties, and allow us to make land or easement purchases when necessary using reliable funding. The result was 2 tools which can be classified as land/development rights acquisition tools. First, the Green Space Program in 1996, and then the Purchase of Development Rights Program in 2001. Although the programs sometimes get confused due to the overlapping nature of their goal to permanently protect open space on land with high conservation value, there are some important differences regarding their emphases, means, results, which have led to having separate programs and results. In short, the Green Space Program's initial focus was inside the primary service area and in certain geographical areas like community character corridors or vulnerable watershed conservation priorities, under threat of development or harm from development. Its flexibility allowed it to encompass fee simple or outright purchases for public purposes or easements on targeted properties. The PDR program, on the other hand, favored properties outside the primary service area, with open space, community character, farmland, or natural resource values. Its application process invited property owners to contact us and to initiate easement discussions. The result from both programs has been more than 2,100 acres of permanently preserved land. The memo references the purposes for which open space can be acquired. As these examples show, the programs have worked independently and together at times to protect notable land in each category. Most, if not all, properties could be listed as having multiple purposes, but for the sake of illustration, examples were placed in single categories in this table. And I'll just invite you to look at the table. On the left side are the state code purposes for conservation, park, or recreational purposes. A notable example being Chickahominy Riverfront Park, which was purchased with green space property. Conservation of land or other natural resources is the second category. And Luna and Zamora property, some of you may remember, was a notable example. Historic or scenic purposes, the Whitehall Tavern has a very historic tavern and house on it, and the Warren Farms had a scenic easement along the frontage. Regarding assisting the shaping of the character, direction, and timing of the community development, the Exxon property at the corner of Green Springs and Route 5 was very helpful in controlling traffic issues. And Jamestown Campground and Yacht Basin, to some degree, I see you chuckle. Jamestown Campground and Yacht Basin doesn't need a lot of explanation as to the multiple levels of values that have provided. The Gilly property had tidal wetlands, and both Mainland Farm inside the primary service area and the Apperson Farms outside the primary service area are notable examples of agricultural and forestal production. The memo explains how various factors have been used in different ways among the programs to determine the conservation values of properties, whether in developing a targeted list or in responding to landowner interests or applications. This is a shortened version of the table that incorporates those factors into a more formalized list for potential future evaluation. It also highlights the potential to leverage this localized knowledge with the modeling resources that the state has made available, not only to aid analysis, but also to guide state funding decisions. Finally, the memo lists specific decision points regarding how staff might proceed with considering potential properties in the future. And just as one example, for park or recreational property, from a local perspective, we look at the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, our Capital Improvements Program, the Virginia Outdoors Plan, but the Department of Conservation and Recreation at the state level has an entirely separate recreational access model, which takes into account a number of variables and looks at it from the state perspective, but there could be some overlap with what we look at locally. The memo also lists in some detail how staff and property owners can better understand which tool to pursue, as well as additional factors that can influence which one would be the best to use and when, given property owner intention, program guidelines, available resources, or funding opportunities. Similarly, there are specific decision points for that regarding which tools the board wishes to have in the toolbox and how staff might proceed with the many requests it receives given the current funding situation. Finally, I'll add that there was a detailed table in the memo describing some of the refinements and funding opportunities that staff and the board may wish to consider in the future. In closing, James City County has a long history, notable achievements, and much opportunity with the tools in its open space preservation toolbox. The direction moving forward can be summarized into two main decision points regarding staying in maintenance mode, or maybe a desire to move more into promotion mode. Once these are decided, it would be very helpful to move into more specific discussion about eligibility and programs to provide staff additional guidance in the near and long term. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have at this time.
I like the decision tree in here.
Thank you.
That was a nice way of putting everything on one page for people who are looking at it, what they can do with their property. Okay, I guess the first issue, could you go back 2 slides there to see? One more.
Page 9.
One more. Okay, yeah, back 4. No, back the other way. Those were the decision points. There you go, summary decision points. So I think that's the first issue for the board, and I think it's fairly straightforward. I think most of us are interested in doing something more than just the maintenance mode. Is that comments from the board, or?
Yeah, that's right.
Certainly my perspective on it.
Start getting things moving and putting things in place, see what we've got.
Okay.
See what we can do, how we can operate.
Well, let's go to the next slide then. When we talk about decision points.
So let me just ask one question about this. In your very thorough history of the county's involvement and the options that are available and so forth, we talked first of all about 1974, the land use valuation. That's not something we actually are using anyplace, is it? Outside of the AFD program?
Yes, if it's an agricultural property, you don't actually have to be in the AFD program to get that if you're actively
So
farming.
you can request, and do we have, how much land is in that?
Most of it is in the AFD program, but there are pieces that aren't. Mainland Farm is actually one. Now, it has conservation on top of it, but it is not in the AFD program just because it's not close to the center of another district.
Well, nor would it make any sense to have it in AFD now, right?
You're correct, but there are other properties out there that. Trying to think of an example, I can't think of one off the top of my head, but we do have them.
And AFDs renew how often?
Every 4 years.
It's 4?
Yeah. Although some people might suggest longer periods of time. And have.
Well, okay, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, one of the reasons we know that not all of the properties are in an AFD is because with the legislature maybe 2 years ago adopted the AFDs of special significance, and they drastically lowered the amount that would be required to make a district from 200 to 75 acres in order to allow other folks. Specifically some that are further away, maybe at the edges of the county, to participate. We've had some properties like that.
So the advantage we have with an AFD is simply that it binds somebody to keep the land out of development for a certain period of time, or incentivizes them to keep it out of development for a certain period of time.
4 years.
Whereas with land use valuation, just whenever they change the use of it, then
That's an annual program.
Yeah.
You could also go the other direction and say that we could require folks to be in an AFD if they wanted the land use valuation.
Right.
That'd be another way to.
Okay.
Ms. Sadler, there have been more than 4 years on some of these that you've seen. It was because it's been sort of the end of about a 10-year program to start lining these things up. So you've seen some with really random, seemingly random, like 5 years, 2 months, 6 years, and everything's lined up. So then once they lined up, we've been doing them at 4 years. Okay. But there's no requirement that it be 4. You can stretch that.
But with this, it gives us the opportunity to choose and pick and use a lot more resources to protect land and to monitor, what's going on with people that want to change and do something with the land. It gives us more opportunities, and there's probably, as we go through this, there probably might be some others, private partnerships or something else that we may not know about that we'll end up researching and may discover there's other options we can add to our list of available tools that people could use to put their land underneath something to keep it from being developed that they want to do. It's not a lot of people think of it as a program that the county is going out and deciding lands that we're going to put in a conservation easement. It's really the owners that want to conserve their land and protect it and don't want it developed future. And they're coming to us and saying, but, with this, and I might be ahead of time, as we develop this and put it in place, I think it's almost a necessary staff position just to do this and keep it running like it should in order to, that's probably would be my suggestion would be one of the first things we do is put somebody in position and start funding that and developing a dashboard of where we're going and kind of help the board along with staff's assistance on, these are the opportunities we have. These are the things coming forward. These are the tools we have. This one fits best in this. This one fits best in this. And then the board saying, these are the areas that we want to try to protect. Certain corridors or certain areas in James City County, and I've said it once, I've said it twice. Forge Road is definitely one that I'd love to see, protected as much as possible. As far as there'll be development of some sort, but how that development, like the last one we just approved, how does that development occur with protecting what we're trying to look for in James City County? Not the board, but the citizens. This is a citizen decision, and it's a citizen's push as far as what I'm seeing. It's not a James City County, we're going to do this. It's a citizen's push and motivation to protect these properties that they own.
I think the decision point where you're talking about having staff evaluate landowner proposals on a case-by-case basis, which is essentially what we do right now if anybody comes to us. And that's sort of what I would call the caretaker mode, if you will. If we want to have this program be more, like you say, a clearer range of options for the citizens to come in and figure out what they can do with their property, but also for us to provide staff with guidance of what it is we're trying to accomplish with this. I think that's sort of the direction I would want to give staff, is that that's the way I'd like to see us go. Now, the question I have about it is, you talked here about the next level efforts to explore program refinements and pursue additional funding opportunities. They said this will require additional resources. I think we know if we're going to do anything, it's going to require some additional resources. But I'm curious about when the part the ability to pursue additional funding. Is there other funding mechanisms out there that we can work into this to try to help make this program go?
Yes, the right-hand column of the funding, let's call it
previous slide.
Page 7, where I list the tool and it fits best with which situation, and then there's funding. There are opportunities on a state level, on a federal level, and with other organizations. There's mitigation funds, for instance. All of those typically have some sort of grant application process, and it's fairly extensive to apply to. This evening, you had an example in front of you. And when we purchased and looked for funding on the Jamestown Campground and Yacht Basin, there were state-level grants and federal grants, and also private money that came into it, and all of that required staff time and resources to align.
And they typically require a matching grant?
A lot of them do. Anywhere from 50%, they'll provide up to 75%. So, and sometimes there is no match required, so it's a matter of applying for it.
I think from an administrative standpoint, Scott and I have had some conversations. I think we would really be looking at a two-part process where it would probably make the most sense to use some funds up front for a consultant, somebody who is sort of intimately aware of all of these programs, who has worked with conservation programs, to get them to help sort of set our program up, right? And then be able to have a staff person come in after that and implement it and do the promotion. So in order to get something off of the ground, there are a lot of folks out there who I think would be able to come in and assist us in that effort. to try to do some of this sort of initial legwork, because as great of a job as Tammy and Paul and the crew have done, I don't think we have the resources to handle that at the moment.
We're straining our folks.
So,
Jason, can you tell me, I'm sorry.
go ahead.
Can you tell me when the bond referendum took place a decade or so ago, what happened with all of that bond money? Is there any of it left over? Did it get zeroed out? What happened with that?
It expires after a while, and I forget the exact year that it expired. So we ran it. We did not exhaust the funds. We ran it up to the statutory time limit. Asked the court to get a couple of extensions. Got those. Ran out of extensions. So it was effectively ended.
I think it was out of the 20, it was about 14 or 15 million that was basically went away because it wasn't used.
Right, so and that was because of the Great Recession, because we didn't have the money to pay the debt service.
It's just like you gave money back, you just didn't use that borrowing capacity.
Yeah, right.
So was part of the problem that people just didn't apply for the programs?
I think the bigger problem from my recollection of it was that we simply didn't have the money to pay the borrowing. And so we really suspended the program at that point.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we got this ship right, and now that we've got this ship right, we've got some, some capability. But I know one thing I heard was the process seemed to drag on, and not blaming anyone. It just seemed to drag on because I think some of it was not knowing what we're doing, not knowing if we had enough funds, not knowing what, and not having.
It was piecemeal.
Yeah, it was. And we can do this, and we can do this, we can switch that. And I knew we ran up against debt at the same time. The economy went crashing, at the same time. So it was just a snowball effect. Now we're in better shape, and we can start looking at it again. But I think this time we need to set this up, starting with somebody to advise us, and then hiring a staff member. New or moving somebody into that position, however y'all's decision goes on that, in order to run the program, to make sure that, when someone comes in, and they bring us a large piece, well, we don't have the funding for that piece, but this is what I can take to the board, and the board can decide on, hey, we can do this, or we can do that, or let's see if we, is there a way we can do it, or this is something that we can put in a 5-year plan. And in 5 years, we'll look at, and put those out there so that, that person doesn't sit there and stay on a string for 5 years wondering what's happening. And maybe we can't today, but in a 5-year period, we can get to that number. And of course, the increases and all will be calculated into it as well as that 5 years.
I guess my question then for staff is given where I think we would like to go, I think the next step would be for you all to come back to us and lay out the consultant a plan on how we would run the study, how we would fund the study, and how we would, then take that and go forward with it. Because I think we're to the point where we need to see some real specifics before we can start committing.
Yeah, did we put any money in the budget for this year for this?
We had some BDR money left over.
Okay.
And I think it was what, 300 something thousand.
That's where that money's going to come from.
Right.
That's probably what we would bring back to you as a recommendation. We didn't budget for a position, but we have talked about that funding. If we would bring it back to you to authorize the use of that.
And I think that would give us enough time to be able to put something in the budget for future years.
Yeah. So I'm going to take a slightly different perspective. I agree entirely with Michael. We need a staff person to get going in this. I don't think that we need a very extensive and detailed effort by a consultant to put together a sort of set of priorities and directions of things. I think that we are going to be always talking about a relatively small number of cases. And each one of them will have particular advantages or reasons to not pursue them. The thing that really does concern me, again, is that I think we are in a period where we are losing some of the primary landowners, and we are in an economic environment where there is pressure for development. So I worry about timing. on all this. And I think many of us may have had contact with people who are, saying, going to make a decision soon about what we're going to do with our property, or, we're not really sure we're going to continue in farming, or whatever their particular position might be. And it's not to say that we can't benefit from consultants' work, but I guess I would rather think about a situation where the consultant and the staff person might work together to get the program up and running more rapidly.
And that's what I was thinking, a consultant is to help the staff person figure out, okay, what do we put in what is 1, 2, 3 steps? What do we need? How do we organize this? Because it's very complicated, and I think there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of different things. And I'm thinking maybe that, someone can come in and basically help set the system up so there's something that we're comfortable with, and, not doing a year-long study on how do we, purchase development rights. Basically, how do we set the business up to run smoothly from this point on?
And I think we've got to think about this as not just PDR and land preservation, but also potential land acquisition for county needs. Because I do think that we're also in a position where we're going to lose some of the most valuable pieces of property for a school site or some other county facility that we might need if we.
So how are we going to, because that would be where I would say we start. That may not be where you say we start. So how are we going to resolve that and then also come up with where we think we should start? I mean, I hear you in that people have to come, but what if we have 2 people that come forward and have 2 different pieces of land in very different areas, and how do we work? I mean, is it just 3 of us want to start there and
the other 2 are out?
Yeah, and I mean, but it may not make it. It may just be who's friends that day. I mean,
right.
I think that's where the consultant would speak with each of us.
And I think one of the things we have to work with the consultant a little bit on is to try to lay out what our objectives are.
Right.
What are we trying to do? What are we trying to protect? Are we trying to, if we got a chance to get at a bargain price, a good school site for future use, that might be a real wise investment of some money. Is it something that meets a specific criteria that we have? Is it the view shed was one, historic or scenic properties, things like that. That we have to be able to give them some guidance so that they come up with sort of a rating system, because what they used to do is they would go through a very complex rating system and they would come back to us, and it would be a complex rating system on a piece of property that maybe did or didn't fit, because we were always waiting for them to come to us. I view this as we're encouraging people to come to us, but we're also, if we know that there's a piece of property that we might want to proactively go out and see if we can recruit this person to do something with that property.
So it seems to me that's where we should start then. Yeah. We should start with the consultant, and we should also see what's out there that we might be interested in grabbing, because whether it's for PDR, I mean, I think we got to have somebody to guide us through that.
Well, and that person has to be the one to help us set up to where the transition is to a staff person, because it's going to require resources and people.
Now, is that a full-time staff position, or?
I would see it as
I'd see it as full. What we had in the past was we had essentially a part-time.
Yeah.
And it was a very, as a result, it was not one of those where we were out there aggressively pursuing things. So I think we're looking at probably a full-time person. It would have to be somebody with some real expertise in this area to be able to, be the county face for that program with the citizens.
I think that person almost, I agree with John on as far as, while the consultant's doing the work, also have that person, to start out together and not wait till the consultant's finished and then look for somebody, try to get those two positions going at the same time. And then, it'll give them institutional knowledge, how it all set up and what we did to get here, and have both of those working at the same time rather than waiting to finish one, then start the other. I think we can get them both going at the
And somebody who's going to develop relationships.
Right.
Yeah. The consultant's going to go away.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. And then our staff person will be there, knowing what the consultant was bringing, and start setting relationships up and that sort of thing, and keep it moving for us.
Well, given what we've discussed here, I would look to staff to see, is there, do you have a good feel for what we'd like to do, and are there any other decisions you would like us to make or guidance you'd like us to give you? Because what I'm looking for you to come back to us with a more substantive proposal that has some timelines and some cost factors that we can then really get our teeth into and have a more in-depth discussion.
At what time?
That's what I'm looking at. What kind of time frame are you guys looking at?
I think your consultant idea and your staff person, we ought to be able to do something in the next 4 to 6 weeks. Quicker than that?
Yes, I think we can probably put an RFP together to get out on the street before the end of summer. I think to Mr. McGlennon's question and for the overall discussion, right now we're currently handling things that come in on a case-by-case basis now.
I think job.
Yeah, and I think what we want to avoid is putting staff in a position of sort of having conversations with these folks and telling them where the board may or may not fall, because we don't always have that information. So bringing a consultant in to help us put some criteria together so they can go out and then have staff talk to property owners, I think would be key. So I think that's what we would look at for the near term. Right, we'll still keep bringing you the case-by-case ones as we get them in. Maybe the only outstanding question is how we're going to pay, or what sort of funding mechanism are we going to put in place? If we're talking about how we did it the first time, what we did was we put $1 million or $700,000 of seed money in to start the programs to sort of give homeowners, hey, this is our good faith effort. We are going to be funding this sort of long term. We're going to be coming up with some larger dollar amounts later. $700,000 is probably not going to take us very far in the land preservation side of things. So, if the board is not interested in committing more than that, if we talked about the borrowing capability, that's something that I think the decision point the board's going to have to address sooner rather than later if we are going to have a robust program.
Right. And
that's one of the things I would hope you would bring back to us, when we're looking at the consultant and how you're planning on standing it up and getting our staff person up and running. We're going to have to look at costs, where we're going to get the money from, how we're going to do it, because we may be looking at some various different sources of funding.
Jason, are there tools that you could add in the toolbox that would come up with ways that we could look at, rather than using taxpayer money to spend on property, because not all taxpayers are in favor of this sort of thing. And I understand the premise behind wanting to protect the property, but not all taxpayers are looking to use their hard-earned tax dollars to pay other people not to develop. So are there other tools that we could include in the toolbox that would maybe be a deterrent for development as opposed to spending money, like maybe looking at the community well situation or whatever? Are there different avenues we could look at?
I'll chime in because I've had this discussion with Adam myself. We went through this when I first got on the board, and it was the rural land study, and it was an attempt to basically discourage outside the PSA further, because the one for 3 acre lots were just getting carved up left and right, and we were having the central well issue. The central well was put in primarily as a deterrent because it was a cost. It got to the point where it wasn't a deterrent anymore. They're doing them all the time, and it really wasn't helping us because we were winding up taking over these systems, and it was creating a problem for JCSA. If you really wanted to do something about deterring that development outside the PSA, you would have to change what I would call the by right density. And we had gotten to a point where we thought it was going to go from about 1 for every 3 acres to about 1 for every 10 acres. There had to be some offsets to that, and there were some options that we were looking at. It never got anywhere, but some options we were looking at of potentially allowing a rural cluster. In other words, you could get maybe a little tighter on a group here and have a much larger part of open space. Though that met with tremendous resistance from the citizens out there. They did not want anybody changing that basic density. And as long as we don't have that change, we're stuck with one 3 acre lots. Now, I'll tell you personally, I'm to the point where I just as soon say, all right, if you want to have 3 acre lots and you're outside the PSA, you're on your own. It's no central well requirement anymore. I would like to see everybody have their own well and their own septic. It's the way most every other rural county does it out there. What we're doing now is by having a central well facility and being able to bring things in with these 3 acre lots, we're actually encouraging development out there. I don't think the market is there like it was at one time, but doesn't mean it isn't coming back.
Yeah, and the other thing I would point out is that you're absolutely right, so that not everybody does support this. But when we put it to a vote of the citizens and suggested it would have an impact on the tax rate, 80% of them said they did want to do this.
Right, but we had to actually go out and try to market to try to get people to take advantage of it. And it's my understanding that it just wasn't, and I get it's because of the recession, whatever, but
right.
it wasn't well received. So,
right. It was not well received in the sense that we couldn't afford it at that point.
And some taxpayers would say, "Well, I personally can't afford to use my hard-earned money."
Right, but that's that's the nature of democratic government. That
right.
not everybody's going to get everything they want all the way through.
Speaking
sure.
from
I agree with you. I
folks that I hear from as well, because the classic line that I hear is that it's a classic transfer of wealth from people who are paying money, paying their tax dollars, and it's going to somebody else to do with.
But sometimes we've been able to do things that actually save taxpayers significant money. So, for instance, we were able to take almost 1,000 homes off the development block when we acquired War Hill. Right. And we were able to put that property to great usage and to, in a sense, defer the expenses of educating the children who would be in 1,000 homes, improve the roads that would be serving that 1,000 families, and do a lot of other things that, reduce the number of police officers we needed, the number of fire officers we needed at that time, and so forth. When we purchased the Gilley property, we removed 50 homes from future development on a road that's already stressed, going on to Jamestown Road, and again, reducing the inventory of homes by a significant amount. And so, that is an economic benefit to the taxpayer in the sense that you do moderate the rate of growth that you're experiencing and have to provide services for as well. So,
and I would offer that there are other alternatives, because one of the ones I remember that was most effective was a piece of property we really wanted to protect, and we wound up buying the property outright, put a conservation easement on it, and put it back on the market and sold it. So the net result to the taxpayer was zero, but we got what we wanted. Right. We got a piece of property that had a conservation easement that protected, and it was up off of Forge Road. So, there are options, and this is why I say it's not just PDR. It's every option in the book on how we can try to leverage money from other sources, grant money. We can leverage programs. We can leverage all sorts of things to try to do more than we have done before, because we have the capability to do it now where we haven't had it over the last 10 years.
Well, I think the AFD program is a great program, and primarily because it does help our local farmers, what few we have left, and it is renewable. So even though some may want it the renewal period longer, they still have the option to come and renew. It's just go through a meeting. Not that big a deal. So I think the AFD program suits that well.
And conservation easements for folks who want to do conservation.
But what I'm saying is that helps the local farmers with their property. So I've always been a promoter of that. And I think to your point, I think it's good that we, and to yours as well, we need to figure out how we're going to do this, because we need to identify properties first and foremost, what we're going to need for schools or fire stations. And if we start getting wrapped around the axle with preserving just for the sake of preserving, and then we're tapping out our money, and then we need to build a school, then what do we do? So, to your point, being able to drive that conversation in the right way so that we don't shoot one foot off because we're hopping on the other one. I mean, I can see a potential problem down the road if we're not very careful. So I would just humbly suggest that we're very cautious in how we do this so that we don't end up messing ourselves up in the long run.
And ultimately, the choice is in the hands of the landowner. They can choose to participate or not participate. Nobody is going to say to them, "You have to do this."
Right, but it's not the choice isn't of the taxpayer who's having to pay it, doesn't want us in the program. I'm just speaking on their citizens' behalf as well.
The other side of that, and I see exactly what you're saying, but the other side of that is let's take this as a good flat piece. Let's take Dozier's piece up on Ford Road. It's a good, perfect, flat subdivision, a piece to make. A developer would drool to go in there and make that a subdivision. If that's protected, then we have less on the roads, we have less on the schools, we have less on the fire, we have less on the EMS and all that. So in turn, we're going to have less taxes by preserving than we would by developing. We've got I think what it is it's a mixed bag of. We're going to have development, and of course, to grow, you have to have development. That's part of a healthy community. But it's figuring out, okay, what are the pieces we want to save for the future? Because we can easily go, let's not do any purchasing development rights, let's not protect anything and all that, and we can just move Newport News right up here. Not picking on Newport News, but we can put Newport News right on Ford Road. And that's definitely, I guarantee that you ask the citizens, would you like to have Jefferson Avenue on Ford Road? I can guarantee that would.
That's what my citizens were saying about Oakland.
Well, that's exactly right.
That's right.
That's exactly right.
And
they said they didn't want more development. They wanted to retain a rural atmosphere.
But everybody voted.
I'm hearing the most is stop the development. And I'm hearing a lot of that from the citizens that interrupt in a rural area because they want it to stay rural. And they don't mind developing certain pots here and there and how we develop. But I think it's a starting point to figure out what will work.
I would also like to know from staff about the full-time position. I mean, I understand initially, but how long do you see that for? At some point, does that go to a 0.5 with some other responsibilities? I just don't see somebody being.
That's a good point. Very good point.
I think that's why we wanted to start with a consultant, quite honestly.
Yeah.
Because, Tammy put together a wonderful flow chart. That's not. We would like to put together a lot of information, and then we will be able to see, I think, how a program would be able to run itself or not.
And I would add that, there's one side of the equation, which is acquisition, and we've talked a lot about that. But on the other hand, there is monitoring and stewarding of these properties and handling property owner inquiries and property owner initiated changes. So there are two sides to the equation that we need to have staffed properly and fully.
Because if we do a piece and there's two houses on it and we're limited to any other structures, then that may come back to that person and say, hey, look, I want to add this. What would the board think if I had a shed or a fence? Because some of the properties can't even change the fence. So that would be something that staff person would be taking care of, as well as any of those internal things that are going on that they're going to have to bring back to the board and say, look, we're thinking on changing this in this area. What are y'all's thoughts? Would y'all be good at it, or do I need to go back and say you can't change it?
We get those periodically now, and,
right?
It takes us a good amount of time to work through that. In addition, you may have instances. It happens very frequently. Those properties turn over to new property owners, and they may not be aware of some of the deed easements or conditions. And so there's a need for staff to go out and look at the properties and get to know those new property owners and explain things to them and establish that rapport.
And just like we did on Ford Road, switching that.
Yeah.
And what do we take off this property and put on this property? And what are all the legal issues that go along with that? And is this part of the law? Can we do this? Can we not do that? So it's more than just going out and buying or purchasing a piece of land.
So by having the toolbox, we'll be able to identify which program would best suit that piece of property.
Yeah.
Yeah, including programs like tax credits that are offered, outside of the these kinds of.
So, for example, like what we approved today, that will potentially give us access to the river, which a lot of citizens, that benefits everyone, not just a handful.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, today's is a classic example of what of the ways we can do this. So, okay, I just want to make sure that we've had the chance for full discussion and that you guys are comfortable with what we're asking as clearly as we asked it.
I'm sure there'll be some more questions.
Oh, I'm sure there will.
We think we have good direction for today.
Good. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. We are down to the last one, which is the James City County Facility and Road Memorial Naming Policy. That we have a resolution before us from.
Yeah, I don't know that I need to read the whole thing, just giving you some of the bullet points on what I did, based on some of the discussion at the last meeting. I tried to take a look at some of the other localities. This is pretty similar to what I found with adjacent localities and localities in Virginia. Really, I think the key point for you all to consider today is the process for this. I know that was one of the concerns of the board. This policy would essentially say if a board member has something that they would like to be considered for a naming policy, they take that to the county administrator, and then the county administrator can have some one-on-one discussions with other board members to make sure that there's some consensus, because we don't really want this to air out publicly if there isn't consensus. So we have that in there. That would allow the board to send those forward. And then we have just some general guidelines. We had talked about whether or not, if it was a public official, if you wanted that person to be deceased or not. I did not include that in there. So public officials would just not be in office anymore. So that would, I left that flexible. So that could mean if it was a previous county employee, they would just be retired. Or if it was a board member, they just wouldn't be serving in office
Michael,
anymore.
you don't qualify.
Yeah.
Not yet. And then if it was a private individual, that there was some connection to the actual
But we didn't put
facility.
in the deceased.
That's right.
So I had a
Named Building
question,
C after you.
I love y'all.
and it says in here about donors. I did. I think I asked you, Adam, after last meeting, or if I maybe I didn't. But can county facilities receive sponsorships on buildings, or does it have to be an individual?
The AT&T Government Center.
Yeah.
I've seen that before, so it must be permissible. I don't know off the top of my head, but I will look that up.
Okay.
We have examples at the library where the library has worked with the Kiwanis Club to have a fundraiser. And then they've named, one of the rooms after the Kiwanis Club, or a private individual who donated a lot through the Friends Foundation. So I think that would be something that.
Yeah, I guess I was more talking on the lines of that if we, let's say, Gatorade wanted to sponsor a pickleball facility. Can it be the Gatorade pickleball facility?
I've seen that asked among my colleagues before, so I can find the answer pretty quickly
Okay.
for you.
They donate every year.
Okay.
Pardon?
They donate
So
every year.
are we?
Yeah.
This is not to be adopted today.
Yes, it could be, unless you have conversation.
Well, I had two things. One is related to exactly what Ruth was talking about, because I guess I was just a little bit uncomfortable thinking about it in terms of we're writing this policy, and the policy is supposedly saying, well, if you pay for it, you can get your name on it, as opposed to saying that a private individual who has significantly contributed to the creation of the facility, because I think that allows you a little bit more flexibility in it and doesn't make it quite as mercenary.
Yeah.
And the other thing is just a matter of language up in the first paragraph after the now therefore be it resolved. I guess I would feel more comfortable with it saying that said resolution shall not be adopted unless for the following policy. The following policy guidelines shall be adhered to by the board. I would feel more comfortable with that saying the board shall be guided by the following policy. Just the idea of telling the board you will do this is I think beyond the scope of powers that this board would have to tell future boards.
Sure.
But rather just to convey that this is what we think you should do.
Okay. Do you have anybody else have any other recommendations for tweaks or changes?
No, I guess I don't want to rule out, though, that buildings could be named.
Oh, no, I'm not saying that. Yeah, that could be the basis on which
yeah.
I think I just don't want to just be, sort of explicitly.
If only you give money.
Yeah, and I think that could be, no building shall be named for a private individual unless that individual significantly contributed to the facility or to the.
Or you might even change it and say buildings may be named for private individuals if they provided they have provided substantial something
impact to the community or something. Kind of like
to the building.
More of a positive as opposed to a negative, if you will.
Okay. Yeah, I can do that.
Do you want to do those two and bring them back to us at the next meeting?
Yes.
All right. Is there any other questions?
No.
7 minutes. Ahead of my schedule. Okay. Anything else? We are board requests and directives.
So I just would like to just take a moment to, I sent all of you something and just said it was just kind of a crazy week last week with recycling and some other things that happened, and just want to publicly thank staff who just have been outstanding, from general services to Jason to Scott. I mean, it takes a village, and really VDOT as well, because it was not. There was a paving issue. It is still an issue, but it wasn't VDOT. It was a contractor of VDOT's, and they're owning it and trying to work through it. And so I very much also appreciate the extra messaging that went out yesterday. I told Scott I wish it had gone out 3 weeks ago, but I'm glad it's out now, and I think it's a great tool for us to use. I hope we'll continue to use it. And not just on recycling, but because there's I know that I was asking yesterday, I know people miss the pickup. And so, what are they supposed to do with that, that bin? And what you're supposed to do is go through it, recycle what you can into the new one, throw the rest away. Don't write me at my home address, please. And but put your cart back out there, because they're going to be sweeping again. So anyway, it's just it's quite a thing to do this type of changeover, and change is not easy. And I also shared with you that I had a citizen who was asking what type of conversations we've had with the trash people, because they believe that as a result of those people opting out from recycle, I'm sorry, that we're going to see an increase in trash charges. It's not really right now. That's not our responsibility. But I would think too, those that aren't recycling are increasing their trash. Of course they are, but even from 1 can to 2, which I would think would be an increased cost on their side as well. So I hope they'll consider the $7. And also, Grace is working on Recycling Perks, which is a program that citizens can earn perks business with local merchants by recycling. And so they hope TFC hopes to have that going in the next 6 to 12 months. So, but anyway, sorry, that was a lot, but just very important to get out. So
I did a few things this week, but I'll just give you one notable one. Mo from Jimmy's Oven and Grill has opened up the new 501 Bar and Grill at Stonehouse. We have a new golf course that's ready to open, and they renovated the golf club facility, and we've done a soft opening, a ribbon cutting, the grand opening. We've been opening that place for a long time, but the food's amazing, and the atmosphere is great. They've done a wonderful job. They're open 7 days a week, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and the golf course is on target to open very soon. Right, Jason? And so anyway, invite everyone to come out. It's a great location, and I know my community is thrilled to have it.
I had two quick things. One is I wanted to give a little pat on the back to one of our local retail outlets, which sells cosmetics in a certain shopping area called Settlers Market. Because they were, my wife came home with some cosmetics that she'd purchased there, and they were packaged in a very small box, very compactly, and had a little note in it that basically said, we've deliberately made this a small package, and we've done it in a way that if you'd like to, you can slip it into a drawer and use the compartments to collect your jewelry or whatever else you might want to do. And we encourage you to patronize folks who will recognize the need to reduce the amount of waste that we are producing. So I thought
Miss Peggy will love that.
That was great to see. The other thing I just wanted to do is to extend congratulations to the roughly 900 students who graduated from our school systems in the last month. And so they are a great group of kids, and some a little older than kids are GED graduates. And it's just great to see them taking on this great responsibility.
Nope, no good. And I attended one of the graduations, and I got to tell you, John gets the Endurance Award for going to all three.
So does Ruth.
Go ahead, too. But and the only other thing I had was we had a Greg Garrett Realty had an opening of their office over in right across from the Monticello Marketplace. So it was very nice little storefront. Another one occupied. There you go. Really good.
we had the Williamsburg Estate Sales open, and there'll be a sale, but if there's a KitchenAid mixer, please leave it be. They'll have their sale this weekend.
They have extended hours too.
So.
All right, we have no need for closed session. I'll be looking for a motion to adjourn until 5 p.m. on July 9th for our regular meeting.
So moved.
Okay. Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. McGlynn?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Do you want
No,